This is a short video on the elasticity section of the Markets and Market Failure unit of Economics AS Level with AQA. The first type of elasticity that we're going to look at is the price elasticity of demand, which is the responsiveness of demand to a change in price. And that's a really important definition to know because things like this come up loads in the multiple choice. PED is always negative, so we ignore the negative sign, but it's a good thing to remember that it's always negative because sometimes you might get a multiple choice where it says from this data we can conclude that, and it might say PED is always negative, and you've got to know that it's always negative even if it presents it in a non-negative form. PED, or price elasticity of demand, is equal to the percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. Percentage change is calculated by dividing the change by the original. So say I was selling 40 books at £10 and then I was selling 50 books at £8. If we're doing the percentage change of the quantity sold, we'd have 10 over 40 because the amount that's changed is 50 minus 40, which is 10, and it's 10 over 40, and it'll be positive because it's an increase. So 10 over 40, which is a quarter, which is 25% percentage. And then say here we're doing the percentage change in price. It was £10, then it went to £8. So the change is minus 2 because 8 minus 10 is minus 2. And it's over the original, which is 10, so minus 2 over 10, which is minus 20%. And you do the top over the bottom and you'll get your PED. Again, these come up quite a lot in the multiple choice, so it's good to have lots of practice doing these calculations. This table is one of the most important things you're ever going to see, and it's all the different types of price elasticity of demand. So you've got from perfectly inelastic to inelastic to unit to elastic to perfectly elastic. And next to it you've got the graph shape. I think a really good way to remember this, or I'm just saying this because it's my way of remembering it, so it probably isn't that good. But anyway, perfectly elastic. If you imagine an elastic band, you can't balance it on its end. It has to be flat down on the table, so it has to be a flat elastic band, because it's not possible to balance it. So if it's perfectly elastic, it's flat, and then you know that inelastic's the opposite, and then you can just follow the pattern. So anyway, perfectly inelastic. If your PED value is 0, it means that a change in price has absolutely no change on the quantity demanded. Inelastic demand, there'll be a quantity demanded changes at a lesser rate than the price. So the percentage that the quantity demanded increases by is less than the percentage that, is less than the percentage that the price changed. So if your value is less than 1, that's the case. For unit elastic demand, or unit elasticity, whatever you want to call it, that's when the value of PED is 1, which means that the quantity that is demanded changes at exactly the same rate as the price. So say the price increases by 10%, the quantity demanded will decrease by 10%. If your value of PED is greater than 1, it means that the quantity demanded changes at a greater rate than the price. So say the price increases by 10%, the quantity demanded will decrease by more than 10%. And then for perfectly elastic demand, any quantity is demanded at a given price, but only at that given price. At any other prices, there's absolutely no demand whatsoever. Obviously, the perfectly inelastic demand and perfectly elastic demand don't really occur in the market, they're just hypothetical situations. It's the middle three that you're probably going to face, but sometimes you will get questions on perfectly inelastic or elastic demands, so it's just good to know them. There are several factors which determine the price elasticity of demand. One of them is substitutes. If there are lots of substitutes, lots of alternative goods or services that the consumer could buy, say you change your price and it goes up, the consumer will just go and buy one of the other substitutes. Or if you put your price down, the consumer who's currently on another substitute will look and see, oh look, he's selling cheaper or she's selling cheaper, and go to you. So the more substitutes there are, the more elastic the demand, because the consumer can very easily swap between things. Habit-forming goods tend to be very inelastic. For example, cigarettes. If I'm smoking a cigarette, I don't know why I was smoking a cigarette, because I don't smoke, but if I am, and then I need some more cigarettes, I don't care what the price is, I'm hooked on these cigarettes, I'm just going to buy them no matter what the price is, so you can put them right up and I'll still buy them, meaning that they're very, very inelastic. Other habit goods are like alcohol. If you're an alcoholic, you don't care what the price is, you will steal to get money to buy this alcohol if you really want it. Then we have our luxuries and necessities. If it's a necessity, for example food, water, you'll have to buy it, so it doesn't matter what the price is, you're still going to buy it, which means it's pretty inelastic. Whereas luxury products, say the price does go up too much, you can't afford it anymore, you just won't get it, so it's quite elastic, a good. The percentage of your income that you spend on the good or service also determines its price elasticity of demand. So say it's a good which you only spend a small proportion of your income on, the demand for it is pretty elastic. And finally, the time period. Everything always gets more elastic in the long run. For demand, it's because more substitutes can become available in the long term. I mean, there's probably a lot of different things, but the first thing I think of is, in the long term, more substitutes become available, so things become more and more elastic. Obviously, they reach a limit, but for the long term, it does go more elastic. Just something good to note. It doesn't come up too much, actually, but it's a nice little fact there. Also, in the long term, things become less fashionable, so people think, oh, look, if the price is that high, I'm just not going to get it. Whereas, if the price goes up anymore, they just won't buy it. Taxes! We know what taxes are. They're a compulsory payment to the government, or subsidies are essentially the opposite of that, so it's a payment by the government to producers to encourage the production of goods or services, or to make them more environmentally friendly. That came up as a definition, I think, last year, 2013. That was the definition on one of the micro contexts. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I'm pretty sure it was. And the instance of tax is the proportion of tax passed on to the consumer, and I'll explain more about that in a second. But essentially, if the government puts a tax of £10 on the good, and the firm pays £4 of the tax and passes £6 of the tax onto the consumer, so it puts the price up by £6 essentially, the proportion of tax passed on to the consumer is 60%, so that's the instance of tax. We're now going to look at the effects of taxes and stuff. So, the effect of tax on a price. If the firm is selling an elastic good, they'll actually pay most of the tax themselves, so the price won't be altered very much. But if it's selling an inelastic good, the firm will pass the tax on to the consumer because it knows the consumer will keep buying no matter how high the price goes, or to a certain extent, meaning that there'll be a much higher price for consumers if it's an inelastic good than if it's a elastic good, in terms of how much tax they're paying. Putting this tax on the goods or the services means that the prices rise, although by different amounts for inelastic and elastic goods, and demand will therefore fall. Obviously, demand will fall a lot. I keep saying demand instead of demand. Demand will fall a lot more for elastic goods, because even if the price only goes up a small amount, an elastic good, small rise in price, big change in demand. Now we're going to look at the impact on tax revenues of a tax. So say we put a tax on an inelastic good, because people will still buy it, and we're putting this tax on, it's quite a big tax, there will be an increase in tax revenue, because people will still buy the good even though they're paying more tax on it, and so the government will just get more tax. However, if the tax is put on an elastic good, demand will fall so much that tax revenue actually falls. I mean, you'll still get some tax revenue, but it won't be as much as you had before you raised the tax revenue. And this is the same in general for pricing of goods and services, at least to an extent. Please note, to an extent is a really good point to put in an essay, just to an extent. Keep repeating that phrase, it's quite important. Say you're selling an inelastic good, put the price up. If you're selling cigarettes, put a higher price, you'll get more money, more revenue. Comes up in multiple choice a lot. The effect of a tax on employment. We know that an increase in tax is part of the fiscal policy, deflationary and contracting. So if there's a tax, it means people have less disposable income, for example, which means that they have less money to spend, so demand goes down, which means that people become unemployed because there's less demand, which leads to a negative multiplier effect and a horrible sad circle in which lots of people lose their jobs. So increase in tax leads to unemployment, whereas a decrease in tax, people have more disposable income, spend more work is needed, employment, blah blah blah, goes up the circle in a positive multiplier effect, and that means that a decrease in tax leads to employment. Finally, subsidies. Say you put a subsidy on a good, if you put a subsidy on a good, it'll lead to a fall in price, essentially. So, say it's an inelastic good, if you put a subsidy on, there'll be quite a big fall in price, but because it's inelastic, there'll be quite a small change in the quantity sold. Whereas if you put a subsidy on an elastic good, the price goes down, the quantity sold, boom, explodes. Though not literally, hopefully. Income elasticity of demand is the proportion to which demand changes. Ooh, I just got a text, popular me. It's the proportion to which demand changes when there's a change in incomes. So for normal goods, so for example a pen. When incomes rise, demand rises because more people can afford pens. But for an inferior good like bus travel, when incomes rise, people think, oh, I don't really need to get the bus anymore, I can afford a car or a taxi, and so demand falls. Income elasticity of demand can be calculated by doing the percentage change in the quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in income. And it's just good to note here that I've put IED. That doesn't exist, I just couldn't fit income elasticity of demand. So that's what it stands for, if you were getting worried about that. Oh, hello, small, hard-to-read table. We're going to look at the values of the income elasticity of demand and what they mean. Say you've got a value that's above 1, it means it's very income elastic, which means that demand rises as incomes rise, which means it's a luxury good. If it's between 0 and 1, it's income inelastic, so it's still a normal good, but demand doesn't rise quite as much as income rises. And if you have a negative income elasticity of demand, that's an inferior good, like bus travel or something like that, and demand falls as income rises. Moving on now to another type of elasticity, cross-price elasticity of demand, which is the extent of the effect of a change in price of good A on demand for good B. And these goods will usually be either complements or substitutes, and we'll see that on the next slide. You work out cross-price elasticity of demand, shortened to XPED, because it's like a cross and X is like a cross-shaped. There might be something deeper than that, but I think that's quite a cool way to remember it. By doing the percentage change in quantity demanded of good B over percentage change in price of good A. Now remember, it's quantity on the top and price on the bottom, and B on the top and A on the bottom, because you might be thinking in your head, oh, it should be A on the top and B on the bottom, but no, it's B on the top and A on the bottom. Now let's decipher some figures for cross-price elasticity of demand. If we have a positive value, it means that they're substitutes, which means that if you buy one, you buy it in place of the other. And a way we can remember this is if it's substitute, if price for one goes up, demand for the other goes up. So they both go in the same direction, so that's positive. Whereas if we've got a negative thing, price of one goes up, demand for the other goes down, that means they're complementary products. For example, an iPod and headphones. If the price of iPod goes up, people aren't going to be able to afford it, and people aren't going to need headphones because they won't have an iPod to use it for. So the price of iPod goes up, demand for headphone goes down. They're going in opposite directions, so negative. As always for demand elasticity, if your value is between 0 and 1, it means it's cross-price inelastic, and if it's above 1, it means it's cross-price elastic. Obviously, if it's inelastic, it means that the change in price of good A has less of an effect on good B in terms of the quantity demanded than if it was price elastic, where the change in price of good A has a massive impact on the quantity demanded of good B. Okie dokie, so price elasticity of supply is the responsiveness of supply to a change in price, which is calculated by doing percentage change in quantity supplied divided by the percentage change in price. And we've already done how to do percentage change. Oh, a bird just hit the window. We've already, oh there, that's not very good. Oh, it's okay, it's flying away again. Sorry, percentage change, we've already done how to calculate those. If you need any extra help, look on the internet or something. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff that will tell you how to do it. Or ask me in the comments or something, so I can explain it to you. There are lots of different types of price elasticity of supply. If it's perfectly inelastic, it means it's got a graph which is a vertical line. Oh my god, do you know vertical and horizontal? It's called horizontal because it's like the horizon and it's flat. Sorry, anyway, a vertical line. It's got a value of 0. This means that when the price changes, there is absolutely no change in the quantity supplied. An example of this is short-term agriculture. You can't suddenly get an extra 50 cows just because the price of beef has increased. So in short term, agriculture is pretty much perfectly inelastic. Inelastic supply is when it's less than 1 but not quite 0, and it's sloped, it's quite steep, and the quantity supplied changes at a lesser rate than the price. Again, agriculture, very hard to alter short term. Unit elastic supply is any line going through the origin, so the quantity supplied changes at exactly the same rate as the price. It's got a value of exactly 1. Elastic supply is when your value is greater than 1, and this means that the quantity supply changes at a greater rate than the price. It's quite a flat line, but it's still slightly sloped. And an example of this is if the price goes up by 5%, the quantity supplied might increase by 10%. because lots of new suppliers think, aha, I'm going to enter the market, and they all come in at once, and so you get a massive increase in quantity supplied. Or the producers already in the market increase the quantity they're supplying. Perfectly elastic supply is when any quantity is supplied at a given price, but if you change that given price, there's absolutely nothing supplied. This value is infinity, and it's a flat line. There are lots of factors which determine the price elasticity of supply. An example of one is time period. Things become more elastic to supply over time. For example, if farmers know that the price is going to go up or it's gone up, they will put in place ideas for cows to have more calves, so you'll have more baby cows, so lots of cows running around, and the farmers can just send them off to the slaughterhouse. So when the price of beef goes up, farmers will think, aha, let's get rid of these cows, and they'll kill them and get lots of beef. But it has to do that over time. It's got to be prepared for that to happen. It's got to know the price is going to go up, because you can't suddenly get 50 cows from absolutely nowhere. The type of product also has quite a big effect on the elasticity of supply. For example, raw materials are quite inelastic in supply, because it takes quite a lot of time to find new resources. Sorry, you just heard my mum come in. And it also takes time to exploit these new resources. So to get the benefits of these resources that you have to find and get them out, it takes quite a while, which is why in at least the short term, raw materials are quite inelastic in supply. Availability of stocks. Stocks are basically the stuff that firms hold. So say a firm makes t-shirts and it's got 50,000 t-shirts in a factory just lying around somewhere. It can react very quickly to a change in price and supply them at once, meaning that it's got quite an elastic supply. Whereas if the firm is literally using all of its stocks, there's nothing left, factories bare, it means that it's a very inelastic supply, so it'll take time for them to produce more. Moving on to the ease of switching between alternative production. Say you've got a firm that produces quite a lot of goods, and I mean, for the sake of example, we'll have good A and good B, and it wants to increase the production of good A. It will decrease the production of good B, and it means it'll have spare resources for the production of good A, but this will only work if it's easy for the firm to be able to switch between good A and good B. The more easy it is for them to switch between good A and good B, it means the higher the elasticity of both good A and good B in terms of supply. Spare capacity is very obvious. If there's more spare capacity, it's more elastic supply. Spare capacity is things like machines, factors of production, and if it's got quite a lot that are empty and suddenly it wants to increase supply because price has gone up, it will just be able to use all these machines, these factors of production really quickly, and supply will increase straight away, so it's very elastic. But if it's maxed out using all of its resources to the full, that means that it will be very inelastic in terms of supply, because it will be unable to produce any more to respond to changes in price. The number of firms in the market and the barriers to entry also have quite a big impact on the elasticity of supply. If there's no barriers to entry, it means that lots of firms can quickly come into the market or out of the market where necessary. So say the price comes up and there's no barriers to entry, it's very easy for firms to come in, meaning that supply is more elastic. Whereas if there's lots of barriers to entry, and for example just one monopoly that produces this good or service, that means that supply will be far more inelastic, because it will be unable to respond to the change in price, because there's only so much that one firm can produce. Whereas if you've got lots of firms that are very easy to come in and out of the market when needed, it's much more elastic, it's much easier to increase the supply quite quickly. And finally, the ability to alter the production method. If you can alter the production method, you can have greater elasticity of supply. For example, if you're producing 20 magazines an hour and you can very easily increase it to 30 magazines an hour, it's much more elastic than if you can only increase it to, say, 21 magazines an hour. That's quite inelastic, because you only increase it a small amount to respond to your change in price. That is the end of my video on elasticity. Hopefully you're enjoying this microeconomic journey, and that my voice isn't annoying you too much, or as much as it's annoying me today. And hopefully I'll see you soon for some more economics revision. Have a lovely day. Bye!